My name is Claire Lawson, and for 18 years, I thought I was living the kind of marriage most women only see in TV dramas and Instagram posts. A devoted husband, a brilliant daughter, a sunlit house on Sydney's North Shore, with jacaranda trees blooming purple every spring. People at church barbecues and school fetes used to smile at me and say, "Claire, you've nailed it. Mark is a unicorn. Tradie turned businessman, still this family-oriented? You're one lucky woman." Back then, I believed them. My husband, Mark Lawson, wasn't just any man. He was the public face of Lawson and Partners, a luxury construction company that built multi-million-dollar homes along the harbor and up and down the eastern coast of Australia. Whenever the media interviewed him for a segment on Channel 7 or the ABC about building the Australian dream, he'd adjust his collar, flash that easygoing Aussie smile, and say, "Family is the foundation of everything. You can't build a strong home on a weak family." Reporters loved it. Clients loved it even more. Behind him in his office in Barangaroo were framed photos. Mark shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at new developments, laughing in a high-vis vest on dusty construction sites. Somewhere in the background of those photos, always slightly out of focus, was me, the wife he thanked in every speech. We met at a charity art auction in Paddington. Back then, I was a high school English teacher in the inner West, obsessed with stories and symbolism. He was already on his way up, a structural engineer who'd just started his own firm, quiet and confident in a way that made people lean in when he spoke. I remember his first words to me as we stood in front of an abstract painting of the Sydney skyline. "You turn words into meaning," he said. "I turn steel and concrete into places those stories can live." It sounded poetic, almost cinematic. Now, all these years later, it feels like a cruel joke. Not long after our wedding, I left full-time teaching to help Mark build what matters most, his company and our family. I handled the books when he was too busy, answered emails from clients, organized charity events, did the school runs, packed lunches, and made sure the house in Lane Cove felt like a sanctuary. I told myself partnership meant sacrifice, and back then the sacrifice felt noble. Our daughter Zoe was our miracle. From the time she was little, she seemed to observe the world the way some kids study insects, quietly, intensely, noticing patterns no one else saw. At 15, while other teenagers were obsessed with TikTok dances and footy players, Zoe was teaching herself Python, scraping public data for fun, and watching lectures from universities on YouTube late into the night. Sometimes, I'd wake up at 2 a.m. to see the glow of her laptop leaking under her bedroom door. I'd knock gently, step inside, and find her cross-legged in an oversized hoodie, hair in a messy bun, glasses slipping down her nose. "What are you doing up?" I'd whisper. "You've got school tomorrow." She'd grin at me, eyes bright. "Just learning how patterns tell stories, Mom." Back then, I thought she meant novels. I didn't realize she meant people. To the outside world, we were the perfect Aussie family. We had a white SUV in the driveway. Family photos lined the staircase. Sunday mornings meant bacon and eggs, Triple J on the radio, and Mark in his Bunnings hat mowing the lawn while I hung washing in the sun. But in the quiet moments, when the dishwasher hummed and the kookaburras stopped laughing and the house finally went still, a strange emptiness crept over me. It felt like walking through a display home, beautiful, polished, staged, but not lived in. Mark had been traveling more. Site visits, he'd say, clients in Brisbane, meetings on the Gold Coast, maybe a quick dash up to Cairns if the resort deal comes through. I'd nod, smile, kiss his cheek. "You work so hard?" "Of course you travel, of course." He'd bring me back small gifts, a box of gourmet macadamias, a silk scarf from a duty-free store at Sydney Airport, a photo of a sunset over the Whitsundays. "I'm doing this for us," he'd say, resting a hand on my waist. "For Zoe's future, for the life we want. I never questioned him, because that's what we're taught love is, right? Trust, belief, loyalty. But slowly, something shifted. Even when he was home, he felt absent. He'd step out onto the balcony to take calls, voice low, words drowned by the sound of traffic from the Pacific Highway. He'd stay up late scrolling on his phone, soft smiles flickering at messages I never saw. Once, I asked, trying to sound casual, "Who's that? Work?" He flashed me that same easy smile he gave the media. "Just suppliers. You worry too much, Claire." I wanted to believe him. I needed to. Because somewhere deep inside, below all the reasons and routines, lived a small, trembling fear. What if I dig too deep and I don't like what I find? So when he told me he'd be in Port Douglas for 2 weeks, "Big resort project, babe. This one could put us on the map internationally." Something in me twisted. A quieter voice, one I'd ignored for years, whispered, "Go see for yourself." I shoved it down. Good wives don't spy. Good wives trust. Good wives don't rock the boat. Until one afternoon, while looking for an old tax document in Mark's home office, I saw it. A photo on his iPad, half hidden between screenshots of floor plans and emails. It was taken in a jewelry store, bright downlights, glass cabinets full of engagement rings glittering like tiny stars. Mark was in the frame, holding a flute of champagne, his reflection captured in a mirrored pillar behind the counter. I zoomed in, heart pounding. In the reflection behind him, just slightly out of focus, was a woman's silhouette, slender, curly reddish hair, a familiar tilt of the chin. My sister, Jenna Reed. My vision blurred for a second, as if my brain refused to connect the dots. Jenna? No. It had to be a trick of light. A stranger who just happened to stand that way. Someone who just happened to have the same hair, the same posture, the same laugh lines near her mouth. But once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. That night I lay awake listening to the distant whoosh of cars on the highway and the soft buzz of the fridge downstairs. Mark snored lightly next to me. The photo stayed burned into my eyelids. Mark, champagne, rings, Jenna. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, a decision formed quietly, like mist over the harbor. I was going to Port Douglas, with Zoe, unannounced. A surprise trip for Mark's 45th birthday. If there was nothing to hide, he'd be delighted. He'd pull us into a hug, laugh, complain that I'd ruined the surprise he'd been planning for when he got home. If there was, well, then I'd finally know what kind of foundation my perfect family had really been built on. Sydney Domestic Airport on a Friday afternoon is chaos disguised as order. Families in thongs and singlets, kids clutching stuffed koalas, businessmen with AirPods and carry-ons, retirees holding hands and moving slowly through the noise. Zoe and I stood near the gate for the flight to Cairns, carry-on bags at our feet. My passport wasn't needed. Domestic, after all. But my fingers kept curling around my wallet like it was a lifeline. For years, airports had meant reunion. Mark waiting at arrivals with flowers from the servo, fake complaining about parking fees, hugging us like we were the best part of his day. This time I didn't feel excitement. I felt like I was about to crack open a sealed vault. Zoe sat on a plastic seat, laptop balanced on her knees, typing rapidly. The glow of her screen lit up her freckles. "Mom," she said, eyes not leaving the code scrolling in front of her, "do you think he'll actually be happy to see us?" "That's the whole idea." I forced cheer into my voice. "He'll have no idea we're coming." Zoe's fingers paused. "Sometimes people don't like surprises." "What do you mean?" She shut the laptop halfway and looked up. Her gaze was sharper than most adults I knew. "Sometimes surprises reveal things they were trying very hard to hide." I laughed too quickly. "You've been reading too many crime thrillers." But she didn't laugh. She just watched me, a long, measuring look that made my stomach twist. Our boarding call came. I squeezed her shoulder. Come on, mission birthday surprise begins now. As we walked down the aero bridge towards the plane, I heard Zoe whisper under her breath, I just hope it's a mission worth taking. The flight to Cairns was a blur of clouds and bad coffee. From there, we connected to a smaller plane up to Port Douglas. By the time we landed, the sun was dipping low, painting the palm trees gold. The resort was the kind you see in glossy magazines, infinity pools overlooking the coral sea, staff in crisp uniforms greeting guests with, "Welcome, how you going?" Couples clinking glasses on balconies as the sky melted into pink and orange. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the receptionist when she smiled and said, "Checking in? Name, please?" "Lawson," I managed. "Claire Lawson. My husband's here already. Mark Lawson. I wanted to surprise him." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. "Yes, he's with us. Lawson and Partners Corporate Booking." She smiled again, professional, oblivious to the storm brewing under my skin. "We've put you in the same wing. Very convenient." Convenient. They gave us key cards and 2 little drink vouchers that I knew I'd never use. Zoe adjusted the strap of her backpack. "Mum?" "Let's drop our bags first," I said, my voice thinner than I intended. "Then we'll go find him, okay?" Our room had crisp white sheets, a balcony overlooking the pool, and the faint scent of coconut sunscreen. I could barely see any of it. I took a shower, more to calm my hands than to wash off the travel grime, then changed into a simple dress. Zoe slipped into a t-shirt and shorts, her laptop never leaving her side. "Ready?" I asked. She studied my face for a moment. "Are you?" I swallowed. "No, but we're doing this anyway." We asked at reception which villa was booked under Lawson and Partners. "Villa 7, they said. "Down by the palms, near the private beach access." My legs felt hollow as we walked down the stone path. The sound of the waves grew louder. Warm air brushed against my skin like a warning. There it was. Villa 7. Light spilling from the sliding glass doors, laughter floating out into the night. Through the sheer curtains, I saw him first. Mark, in a linen shirt, holding a beer, head thrown back in a laugh I recognized immediately. Beside him, leaning close, her hand resting on his forearm as if it had always belonged there, was Jenna. My sister. My blood. In a silky dress I'd seen her wear at Christmas. They weren't just standing close. They were moving around each other the way couples do when they've rehearsed the dance in private. Easy, unconscious, intimate. Something inside me cracked with an almost audible sound. Zoe's fingers tightened around my wrist. "Mom," she whispered, "we can still walk away." But I'd already stepped forward, my hand on the door handle. The glass slid open with a soft hiss. For a moment, time froze. Mark turned, smile still plastered on his face, until he saw me. The color drained from his skin. "Claire?" he choked. "What are you doing here?" Jenna spun around, eyes wide. "Claire, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "Oh, good, because from here it looks like my husband and my sister booked a romantic villa at a tropical resort together." Zoe stood just behind me, silent, her eyes taking in every detail. Mark set his beer down, hands raised slightly, like I was a wild animal he didn't want to startle. "Claire, listen, it's complicated." "No," I said quietly. "It's simple. You lied. Both of you." Jenna stepped forward, tears already glistening. "I didn't mean to hurt you, it just happened. We didn't plan this." "You didn't mean to hurt me?" My voice came out cold, even to my own ears. "You're my sister, Jenna. You knew every heartbreak I've ever had, and somehow you decided to become the worst one." "Claire, please," Mark began, but I reached into my bag with shaking hands. The velvet box felt heavy, cruelly so. "I flew here for your birthday," I said, my voice trembling. "I saved for 3 years to buy this because you said one day you wanted a watch to mark the moment you made it." I opened the box. The Rolex bracelet caught the light, glittering like something from another life. "Happy birthday, Mark," I whispered. "Here's the watch you wanted. Now it can count the seconds between your lies." I let it drop. The metallic clink of it hitting the polished floor echoed through the villa like a gunshot. No one spoke. I turned, grabbed Zoe's hand, and walked out. Down the path, past the palms, towards the resort entrance. My vision blurred with tears, my chest tight as if someone were pressing a heavy weight on it. When we reached the main drive, the humid air hit me so hard I had to grab the brick pillar for balance. "Mum," Zoe said softly. "Breathe. In. Out." I looked at her and saw something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't shocked. Not really. "You knew," I whispered. "Didn't you?" Her eyes dropped to the pavement. "How long have you known, Zoe?" My voice cracked. "Tell me the truth. I deserve at least that." She paused, then answered in a calm, steady tone that sounded far too old for 15. "About 2 months. 2—" My knees almost buckled. "Zoe, you're a kid. You should have told me. You should have—" "You wouldn't have believed me," she said quietly. "You still loved him too much. And you trusted her because she was your sister." Tears burned my eyes. "You shouldn't have had to carry this alone." She met my gaze, her own eyes full of something I couldn't name. Sadness, maybe, and something colder underneath. "Someone had to start looking at the data, Mum." A taxi, idle near the entrance, caught her eye. She raised her arm. "Let's go," she said. "Not home, just away from here, tonight." I nodded, numb. The taxi driver, a middle-aged bloke with a faded Broncos cap, jumped up as we approached. "All good, ladies? Where to?" "Anywhere that's not here," I whispered. He blinked, then nodded, understanding more than I said. The door shut with a soft thud. As we pulled away, Villa 7 grew smaller in the side mirror, its golden light glaring against the dark like a lie that had finally been dragged into the open. Rain came out of nowhere. It hammered against the taxi roof, turning the world outside into smeared streaks of green and neon. Inside, silence sat between us like a third passenger. Zoe stared straight ahead, hands folded in her lap, laptop bag pressed to her side. "How long?" I asked after a while, my voice barely audible over the rain. "How long have you been tracking them?" Her jaw tightened slightly. "I found the first pattern 8 weeks ago," she said. "I was analyzing public Instagram check-ins for a project. Dad's, Jenna's. Their locations kept overlapping. Same cafe in Newtown, same bar in Surrey Hills, the same weekend away in Byron, just under different captions." My stomach twisted. You did this as a project?" "It started as curiosity." She finally turned to look at me. "Then it became clarity. Grandpa Peter always says, numbers don't care about your feelings, love. That's what makes them useful." Peter, my retired data analyst father, who lived alone in a unit in Newcastle, spending his days reading statistics journals and arguing with commentators on ABC radio. Of course it would be him who gave her the tools. Of course it would be her who chose to use them. "You shouldn't have had to be the adult," I said, tears spilling down my cheeks. She gave a small, sad smile. "Someone had to be brave enough to look." We checked into a smaller boutique hotel closer to town, one with less glass, less glamour, more chipped paint and kindness. The receptionist greeted us with cold towels and pineapple juice, completely unaware that she was handing refreshments to a woman whose life had just been detonated. In the room, I sat heavily on the edge of the bed and caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the Claire I recognized from photos on Mark's office wall. This woman looked older, fragile, like someone who'd been holding up a house by herself for too long, only to watch it crumble anyway. Behind me, I heard the familiar sound of a laptop booting up. I turned. Zoe had taken the small desk by the window. Her fingers flew over the keys, lines of code and graphs flashing across the screen. "Zoe," I said slowly, "what are you doing?" She didn't answer at first. Then she swiveled the laptop slightly so I could see. On the screen was a map of Sydney and surrounding regions, dotted with colored points: red, blue, green. A header at the top read, "Digital Analysis, the Lawson Case." My heart stumbled. "What is this?" "These are geolocation patterns from Dad's public posts," Zoe replied, her voice taking on a professional cadence I'd never heard from her before. "And from Aunt Jenna's accounts. Insta, Facebook, LinkedIn check-ins. Red is him, blue is her, green is everywhere they overlapped." The map was almost crowded with green. Restaurants in the CBD, beach cafes in Manly, weekend stays in Byron Bay and Newcastle, a random motel halfway to the Hunter Valley. "Oh my God," I whispered. "You've been tracking them?" "Not illegally," she said quickly. "I didn't hack anything. It's all publicly available data. Grandpa taught me about open source intelligence, OSINT, and how to analyze it. I just applied it at home." I stared at the screen, then at her. "You did all this by yourself?" She nodded, a faint, bitter smile tugging at one corner of her mouth. "Data doesn't lie, Mom. People do." Something inside me, beyond the grief and shock and humiliation, flared with a strange, twisted sense of awe. "What are you going to do with it?" I asked. "Send it to me, to a lawyer?" Zoe held my gaze. "I already did something with it." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" She glanced at the clock on the bedside table. "At 8 a.m. Sydney time tomorrow," she said quietly. "My system will send a summary of this report to Dad's main client list, key staff at Lawson & Partners, and a handful of media outlets. I've scheduled it. It'll go out automatically from a no-reply domain I set up." My throat closed. "Zoe, no. Do you have any idea what that will do? To him? To all of us?" Her expression didn't flicker. "He destroyed this family by choice," she replied. "I'm just making sure he doesn't get to hide the rubble under carpet. If data can expose corrupt politicians and dodgy banks, why should it stop at the front door of our house?" "This isn't right," I whispered, standing, hands trembling. "Revenge doesn't heal anything." She looked up at me, eyes suddenly softer. "It's not revenge, Mum. It's accountability. You raised me to tell the truth. Grandpa raised me to respect the facts. I'm just combining both." That night, I didn't sleep at all. Rain tapped against the balcony door in a relentless rhythm. The room smelt faintly of salt and damp towels. Zoe sat at the desk, refining graphs and checking formulas. Every now and then, a new chart would appear on the screen, a timeline of overlapping check-ins, a bar graph of message frequencies, a sentiment analysis of caption tone. Every pixel was another betrayal made visible, every number a nail in the coffin of the story I'd told myself for 18 years. "Zoe," I said quietly after a while, "how did you even think to do this?" She shrugged slightly. "Grandpa always said truth is like data. You can bury it, ignore it, or pretend it doesn't matter, but it still exists. You just have to know where to look." I wrapped my arms around myself as if I could hold my heart together. "And what happens after?" I asked. "Once the emails go out, once everyone knows, what then?" She finally looked at me. The glow from the laptop screen lit up her face, half child, half woman. "Then maybe Dad will understand that you can't build a life on lies," she said. "Not even in a country that loves second chances as much as Australia does." Near dawn, the rain finally stopped. The sea outside turned slate blue, waves breaking against the shore in a steady, indifferent rhythm. I stepped onto the balcony, the tiles cold under my bare feet. The air smelled of wet earth and salt. Behind me, I heard Zoe's keyboard fall silent. "Mum." I turned. She stood there, hands by her sides, eyes searching my face. "Promise me something," I said. "If you go through with this, don't lose yourself in it. Justice is good, but don't let it make you hard." For the first time since this whole nightmare began, her expression cracked. She crossed the room in 2 steps and wrapped her arms around me. "I won't," she whispered. "I'm doing this for us, not for them." At 6 a.m., local time, I made tea with the small kettle, my hands steadier than they'd been all night. Zoe sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, eyes fixed on the countdown timer. 1 hour 56 minutes to 8 a.m. in Sydney. "Once this goes out," she murmured, "there's no undo button, no edit and resubmit. It just exists." "Maybe," I said, sitting beside her, lacing my fingers with hers. "That's not entirely a bad thing." We watched the numbers tick down together, mother and daughter side by side, united not by peace, but by a shared commitment to something rawer and harsher than comfort: truth. Back in Sydney, the city was just waking up as Mark walked into a sleek cafe in Barangaroo with 2 major clients, a property investment duo from Melbourne. He ordered his usual long black, laughed about the weather, talked about a potential development in Western Sydney that would change the skyline. His phone buzzed. Once, twice, then again. Notification after notification, stacking up like falling dominoes. "Popular guy," one of the clients joked. Mark forced a smile and picked up his phone. The lock screen was flooded with alerts, emails, messages, subject lines repeating the same phrase: "Digital Justice Report, the Lawson Analysis." His stomach flipped. He opened the first email. From Z. Lawson, no reply at digitaljustice.au. Subject: Integrity Report, the Lawson Analysis. The first image that loaded was a map. Red and blue dots scattered across Sydney and beyond, green dots clustering wherever those 2 colors overlapped. Restaurants in Darlinghurst, hotels near Circular Quay, a serviced apartment in Brisbane. He scrolled, graphs of timestamps, message frequency charts, screenshots of public posts, a short clinical paragraph at the end. Conclusion: probability of accidental correlation between subject M and subject J's locations over the recorded period is less than 0.001%. Statistical certainty of covert relationship is confirmed. His vision went blurry. "You all right, Mark?" one of the clients asked. "You look a bit crook." Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was Liam Carter, his friend and co-founder at Lawson & Partners. "Mate," Liam said without preamble, "what the hell did your daughter just send to every major client we have?" "My daughter?" "Yeah. Some kind of forensic report. Data sets, maps, graphs. It's in every inbox from here to Perth. And I've just had 2 journos from the ABC and The Age call me asking for comment." Mark's hand shook. I'll call you back." But the phone wouldn't stop. Every time he hung up, 3 more calls came in. Emails pinged like hail on a tin roof. Within an hour, screenshots of Zoe's report had spread beyond client inboxes. Someone forwarded it to a journalist friend. The journalist posted a blurred version on Twitter. By 9:15, the hashtag #DigitalJusticeAU was trending across Australian social media. Teenager exposes dad's affair using data science. Lawson & Partners boss preached family values while cheating with sister-in-law, OSINT report reveals. When your kid weaponizes maths against your lies, breakfast shows turned it into a segment. Talkback radio callers debated whether Zoe was a hero or a monster. On the project, panelists shook their heads and said things like, "This is the new age of truth. It's not hearsay anymore. It's data." At the Family Court of Australia in Sydney a few weeks later, I sat beside my lawyer, Priya Desai, sharp, calm, and known for her work in cases involving digital evidence. Across from us sat Mark, thinner now, suit hanging slightly looser than it used to. He wouldn't look at me. His own lawyer whispered in his ear, eyes darting nervously between screens. Behind me, Zoe sat quietly, laptop closed on her lap, like a dormant bomb. The judge, Her Honor Justice Margaret O'Connell, adjusted her glasses and spoke. This court acknowledges the matter of Lawson versus Lawson relating to marital infidelity, emotional damages, and misrepresentation of assets. Priya rose. Your Honor, she began, my client's marriage has been irreparably damaged by the respondent's prolonged deceit, both privately and publicly, while he cultivated an image of integrity and family values to grow his business. She gestured towards Zoe. What distinguishes this case from many others is the nature of the evidence before you. It is not gossip, not speculation. It is verifiable digital analysis compiled from public sources. Mark's lawyer sprang up. Your Honor, this so-called report was prepared by a minor, using data gathered without my client's consent. We question both the legality and the reliability of... Justice O'Connell held up a hand. The court has already heard from independent experts, she said evenly. The report in question uses only publicly accessible information, social media posts, location check-ins, open-source metadata. There is no indication of hacking or illegal interception. As for reliability, 3 data scientists from the University of New South Wales and 1 from CSIRO have confirmed the methodology. We will proceed. The lights dimmed slightly as Priya clicked a remote. Zoe's report appeared on the large screen at the front of the court. Slide after slide, overlapping GPS points, date-stamped posts, heat maps of movement patterns. This section, Priya said, highlighting a cluster of green, shows over 80 overlapping location matches between Mr. Lawson and Ms. Jenna Reed over a 4-month period. And here, she clicked again, revealing a line graph, we see message frequency patterns aligning with the respondent's claimed business trips, including to Port Douglas. The courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the projector. Was this report created entirely by the minor? Justice O'Connell asked. Yes, Your Honor, Priya replied, with guidance from her grandfather, a retired systems analyst. The experts mentioned earlier have independently evaluated and authenticated her work. The judge turned her gaze to Zoe. Young lady, she said, her tone softening just a fraction. Do you understand what your actions have set in motion? Zoe stood. Yes, Your Honor, she said, voice steady. I understand it exposed what was already true. And what motivated you to create this report? Zoe held her gaze. My father liked to say that family is the foundation of everything, she replied. I wanted to check if that claim held up to scrutiny. A few quiet gasps rippled through the room. Mark's shoulders sagged. Later, after hours of arguments and submissions, Justice O'Connell delivered her ruling. Mr. Lawson, she said, this court finds that you have not only breached the vows of marriage, but have done so while publicly profiting from a carefully curated image of moral integrity and family devotion. Given the overwhelming digital evidence and its corroboration by independent experts, this court rules in favor of Mrs. Claire Lawson. She listed the orders. Full custody of Zoe to me. 50% of Lawson and Partners to be transferred to my name. Ownership of the family home in Lane Cove. Half of all remaining joint assets. Her gavel came down with a sharp crack. The court acknowledges that the evidence presented, commonly referred to as the Digital Justice Report, represents an unprecedented yet lawful form of truth verification in family law. This matter is now concluded. Outside the court, reporters clustered like seagulls around a hot chip. Mrs. Lawson, how do you feel? Do you forgive your husband? Zoe, what's next for you? Uni, tech startups, politics? I could barely see through the flashes. I just said, we're moving forward, and kept walking. But Zoe paused. I didn't destroy my dad, she said clearly, looking straight into the cameras. I just stopped his lies from hiding. That one sentence spread across every news outlet in the country. Tech blogs analyzed her methods. Universities invited her to speak. Some called her a hero. Others called her dangerous. Mark moved quietly out of Sydney. The company, once swaggering and loud, collapsed under the weight of lost contracts and damaged trust. Jenna lost her job at the car dealership and became a regular face in tabloid headlines. The sister behind Australia's biggest digital affair expose. For a while, their names were everywhere. Then, as always, the news cycle moved on. Zoe and I didn't stay in Lane Cove. We sold the house, the staircase photos, the manicured lawn, the echo of a life that no longer fit, and moved south to a small town just outside Hobart, Tasmania, where my dad had decided he wanted fresh air, quiet, and good coffee. Our new home wasn't glamorous. It was a weatherboard place on a hill overlooking the Derwent River, with a veggie patch in the backyard and kookaburras that laughed us awake at dawn. My father, Peter, spent mornings tending tomatoes and evenings arguing with the news on TV. One afternoon, as we washed dishes together, a familiar warmth in the small kitchen, he cleared his throat. "Claire," he said, "I'm no good at big speeches. Never have been. But I know numbers. I know patterns. I know what survives when nonsense ends." He dried his hands on a tea towel, turned to me. "You were always the heart," he said. "Zoe's the brain. I'd like to offer something steadier, the hands that help rebuild if you'll let me." I laughed through sudden tears. "You don't need my permission to be my dad." He smiled. "I wasn't just talking about you." Later that year, a man named Liam Harris arrived in town to work on a bridge safety project. He was quiet, kind, and had the gentle patience of someone who'd learned to respect broken things. He and I met at the local cafe, both reaching for the same sugar packet. "It's all right," he said, grinning. "You go first. I'm trying to cut down anyway." We started with coffee, then walks by the river, then dinners where Zoe joined us, sometimes silently, sometimes grilling him on engineering ethics and AI safety. One evening, while the three of us were cleaning up after dinner, Liam set down a plate and cleared his throat. "I'm not flash," he said. "I don't do grand gestures or poetic speeches. I build things that last. That's sort of my thing. I'd like to build a life with you both. Only if it feels right. No hard feelings if it doesn't." My heart fluttered like it had forgotten how, then suddenly remembered. "I'm not perfect," I said, my voice shaky. "I come with a lot of history." "Good," he replied, smiling. "So do I. That means we don't have to pretend." We married in a small ceremony in a friend's garden. No media, no speeches for cameras, just a handful of people we trusted and the smell of gum leaves and rain. Dad walked me down the makeshift aisle, tears shining in his eyes. Zoe wore a simple pale blue dress and, true to form, still had her laptop nearby, just in case. At the end of the ceremony, she tapped a glass with her fork. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said. "To Mom and Liam, proof that even after a total system failure, you can reboot a better version of life, one with less bugs, one built on clean code, trust, respect, and regular software updates, like communication." Everyone laughed. I cried. For the first time in years, my tears were from something other than grief. 2 years later, a letter arrived for Zoe from the University of Melbourne. She stood in the hallway, envelope shaking in her hands. "Mom," she said, I think this is it." I held my breath as she opened it. Her eyes scanned the page, widened, then filled with tears. "They've accepted me," she whispered. "Full scholarship. Double major in computer science and ethics. They want me to work with a research group on responsible AI." Dad whooped. Liam hugged her. I just stood there and cried, overwhelmed with pride and fear and joy all mixed together. Years passed. Zoe moved to Melbourne, crushed her degree, and then some. Her final year project, a system that analyzed patterns in communication to flag emotional dissonance, turned into something bigger, much bigger. By 21, she was leading a research initiative at a new center called the Institute for Ethical Artificial Intelligence, based right next to the university. The media nicknamed her the girl who made data care. Her program, Aurora, was adopted by schools, clinics, and even some government departments across Australia. It didn't punish people. It didn't expose secrets to the world. It simply noticed when someone's words said, "I'm fine," but their pattern of communication suggested they were anything but. It would send a gentle prompt. "You seem to be under more stress than your words suggest. Would you like to talk to someone?" Mental health stats shifted. Counselors reported couples seeking help earlier. Workplaces quietly integrated Aurora into support systems. At a press conference one day, a journalist asked, "Dr. Lawson, your work was clearly inspired by what happened in your own family. Do you regret exposing your father the way you did?" Zoe paused. "Regret is a shadow," she said. "It only follows you when you keep walking backwards. I chose to move forward." The quote was plastered on news sites, printed on posters in uni common rooms, turned into Instagram captions, and eventually engraved on a plaque at the university's Innovation Center. Back in Tasmania, life settled into something I never thought I'd have again. Ordinary, gentle peace. Our weatherboard house filled with the smell of tomato stew and fresh bread. Dad hummed along to old midnight oil songs while pruning rose bushes. Liam came home from site visits, boots muddy, eyes tired, but kind. Every Sunday night, no matter how busy she was, Zoe flew down or logged in on video. Family dinner was non-negotiable. Sometimes she'd sit at our table in person, passing the salad, laughing at Dad's terrible puns. Sometimes she'd appear on the laptop screen propped near the salt and pepper, sharing stories from Melbourne as if she were there in the room. "Do you ever feel like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders?" I asked her once as we washed dishes. She dried a plate, smiled. "No," she said. "I just feel like I'm helping rewrite the code, one truth at a time." Dad chuckled from his armchair. "That's my granddaughter, debugging humanity." I finally wrote a book. Not the novel I'd once dreamed of, but something truer. After the Storm, A Mother's Guide to Truth. It didn't dwell on revenge. It talked about courage, about letting go, about rebuilding, about the exhausting, necessary discipline of being honest with yourself. Readers wrote to me from across Australia. Women in small towns, women in big cities, daughters who'd discovered their fathers weren't who they said they were, wives who finally left, mothers who stayed but changed the rules. One evening, an email popped into my inbox with a subject line that made my breath catch. From Mark Lawson. My hands shook as I opened it. "Claire, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I've followed your work and Zoe's from afar. You two took the mess I created and somehow turned it into something that helps other people. You were always stronger than I acknowledged. Thank you for raising the woman who reminded the country that truth isn't optional. Mark." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I forwarded the email to Zoe with a single sentence. "Some truths take the long way home." Her reply came back almost instantly. "I know, Mum." The dataset's finally complete. Years later, standing on our small back deck in Tasmania, watching the sun sink behind the hills, I leaned into Liam's shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That maybe life isn't really about what breaks you," I said slowly. "It's about what you choose to rebuild with what's left." He squeezed my hand. "And what rebuilt you?" I smiled. "Truth, love, and the courage to start over, again and again, if that's what it takes." Inside the house, a framed photo hung over our modest fireplace. On the left, a court step shot from years ago in black and white, Zoe and me, leaving the family court in Sydney, fingers intertwined, faces pale but determined. It had been printed in a newspaper once. Someone had sent me the clipping. On the right, a newer photo. The three of us, me, Zoe, and Liam, standing in front of our weatherboard house, gum trees swaying overhead, Dad in the background holding up a tomato like a trophy. I looked between them and felt something ease in my chest. Funny, I thought, how the truth that nearly destroyed us ended up being the strongest foundation we ever had. Ban noi jung, ban truok chua ju ba moi trang abon, nendoi jai min tiep tuk kau chuyen theo jung makku, morong sao hon ve kwak joy Claire, Zoe, Mark Vaka Hithong Aurora. Years later, when I thought the waves had finally calmed, life surprised me again. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. Tasmania was just beginning to thaw. The mornings were less bitter, the evenings stretching out with a little more light. I was hanging washing on the line. Liam's high-vis shirts, Dad's flannelette, my own weary but beloved jeans. When my phone buzzed in the pocket of my hoodie, I pegged the last shirt, wiped my hands on my pants, and glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Melbourne. For a second, my heart leapt in that old, familiar way. Emergencies, accidents, late-night calls from hospitals. Motherhood brands you with an anxiety that never fully fades. "Hello?" I answered, trying to sound calm. "Hi, is this Claire Lawson?" A woman's voice. Bright, professional, slightly rushed. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Amelia Brooks, producer from Inside Australia. We're a current affairs program on SBS. I'm calling about your daughter, Dr. Zoe Lawson."